time to book our tickets yet again as we look forward to another virtual tour of Waterford treasures in the good company of Eamonn McEneaney. Good morning, Eamonn.
Well, Eamonn.
Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Ollie. Good morning, listeners.
Today you're going to talk about Daniel O'Connell, MP for Waterford, 1830, a very famous Irishman.
He was indeed. And before I talk, I just got a letter this morning with the decanter we have in the Bishop's Palace, the Penrose decanter from the 1780s on a stamp. So see, Waterford is getting in there anyway in the postal system.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, but Daniel O'Connell, right, he's great. He was one of the great Irish figures, I suppose, of all time.
And you know, Eamonn, you wouldn't associate him with Waterford. You were just making the point he's kind of forgotten about in lots of ways.
He is.
I wouldn't have associated him with Waterford so much.
Unfortunately, we haven't, I suppose. He's kind of gone out of fashion to talk about him for some weird reason. We've got this absolutely fantastic painting. It's nearly 9 foot tall. He's standing in it by his desk and there's a chair. It's one of 2 paintings of him done by Catherine Smith in 1871. The other one was for Dublin City Council. This one was for Waterford Council. And unfortunately, the Dublin one was burnt in a fire in 1909 and our one survives, thankfully, and now in the Bishop's Palace. I suppose for people, Daniel O'Connell, he's the man who allowed Catholics to become members of Parliament, or he made sure the law was changed to allow them to become member of Parliament, hold high positions in government and become judges. He was born in Kerry, Carsavine. He was in France and was horrified by the French Revolution and the violence there, of course, all the beheadings. Then came back to Ireland and was equally horrified then by the 1798 rebellion here in Ireland.
Awful times.
He was totally opposed to violence, terrible times, totally opposed to violence. Then he decided in 1820, he was a lawyer, of course, in 1823 to start fighting for Catholic emancipation, which allowed Catholics to become members of Parliament and hold high government positions and judges and things like that. And the man he associated with himself, and he was hugely influenced in his life by 2 very famous Waterford men, both of them called Thomas. The first man was Thomas Wise, of course, from the famous old Wise family, and he helped find the Catholic association with Wise, and Wise came up with this very clever idea. You couldn't get a Catholic at this stage elected to Parliament, so he said, let's get liberal Protestants, and here in Waterford, the first great victory with the Villiers Stewarts in the west of the county, he got him elected. Remember, there wasn't secret ballots, so he was elected as a Catholic, as a supporter, a Protestant supporter of Catholic emancipation. They had about 6 other victories, really organised by Thomas Wise here in Waterford. And then, of course, on the 6th one, they decided to put up O'Connell. He went to Parliament, asked to take the oath, he couldn't, and then Parliament realised this is nonsense and they gave Catholic emancipation. That was in 1829. The government fell after that, and there was another election, and then he was elected for Waterford. That was in 1830. 1831, there was another election, and he was then elected for Dublin, and Thomas Wise took the seat for Waterford, and Thomas Wise would play a big part in his life also. The 2 big issues that happened after that was then the Irish Catholics were looking for universities, more universities, only Trinity College at the time, and also, of course, repeal of the Act of Union, which would give Ireland its Parliament back. A free Parliament would be still part of Britain, but the Parliament that we had 1782. He looked for what's called the repeal of the Act of Union, which would give us our Parliament, and he was making great progress with that. Again, Wise was very involved in that, and he's involved in monster meetings, and Marr was involved. Thomas Francis Marr's father was very involved, and Thomas for a while was very involved himself. And basically, these monster meetings, there was a big one here in Waterford. They'd imagine 300,000 people came to Waterford.
What? I have to ask him, and I was thinking about this when I knew you were going to be talking about Daniel O'Connell. Like, he obviously was a great orator, and he had a fine, strong voice. But how was he heard by the even the mid-region of that?
They had relays. They didn't have WLR to broadcast at the time, so they had relay.
Chinese whispers.
And where exactly in Waterford did they fit these 300,000 people?
Well, he had a big meeting up in Ballybricken, so he couldn't have fitted 300,000 there, so it must have been outside the city. But he did come, and the other great thing he did, of course, was very involved in the temperance movement, because these obviously didn't want people coming to these things drunk. Hugely important. Then the Tara was the big one, of course, again, symbolically, the Hill of Tara, the High Kings of Ireland, and then he organised one for Clontarf, which the government banned, and then he was arrested and found for conspiracy, but he appealed it and he got left out of jail. But remember, there wouldn't have been a jail in the strict terms of the jail as we know it now, because he was obviously a very important character. Then after that, his will then was broken. He had failed. But where he comes involved, then another great Waterford man is Thomas Francis Marr, of course. He was part of the younger group who originally supported him, but then Thomas Francis Marr made this famous speech, which he's known as Marr of the Sword for, and he says,
he got more militant.
In other words, use violence, and they split. Then he split with Thomas Thomas Francis Meagher over the sword speech. Well, it was around that, but that's the symbol of it, that sword speech, and he split with Meagher. And sadly, as a broken man then, and the famine, of course, and all the rest of it, he decided to go to Rome. Of course, he was a staunch Roman Catholic. On his way to Rome, he died, and he asked that his heart be buried in Rome, and his body was brought back to Dublin. That wonderful big round tower and that great monument to him is in Glasnevin Cemetery today.
Wow.
I mean, it's one of the most impressive burials, I suppose.
I've done the tour of Glasnevin Cemetery, and it is amazing. You can go right into the crypt. Tour. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, you learn so much there.
Recommend the tour. I think for Irish people to remember, he was so important at the time internationally. Bismarck, the great Prime Minister, Chancellor of Germany, when Germany was united, he said there'd be three men remembered of the 19th century. He mentioned one of them as an Austrian, another German, and he said Daniel O'Connell will probably be the one best remembered in history, because he was the man that got mass movements, non-violent mass movements together. So you talk about civil rights campaigns in America and all the rest of it. He was the founder of that. The other great honour to him at the time was the Austrian Empire was huge, big Catholic empire, well controlled by Catholics anyway, Roman Catholics. And the Austrian Emperor at the time said that all the bells in every church in the Austrian Empire were to ring out to commemorate Daniel O'Connell.
The great liberator.
Now we're out of time, Eamonn, but that was super fascinating, and it'll be up online later. Thank you, and talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Eamonn.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.